Hey guys, this is Zane here, back at it with another episode of watching Monster House every single day of the month with friends because I want them to. And this is finally the big exciting episode that I've been wanting to get done for quite some time now. And this is actually the Q&A episode with the director Gil Kenan. Now, I don't actually have his voice and stuff here to get on with because I didn't want to try and take up too much time and try and organize that with him, because I guarantee he's a very busy man and I didn't want to be annoying or anything of the sort. And also, the movie came out 14 years ago, so trying to put him on the spot for a couple questions and whatnot would probably make it quite difficult, so didn't want to do it to him. But anyways, I was able to get some really good questions shot towards him and some fantastic answers back. But I'm not going to hop directly into that right away. As I would with any other episodes that I would do with someone else, I'll have a little introduction for him and see what he's up to these days. So, first things first, if you don't know him for Monster House, you might know him for a couple other different movies. So, besides Monster House, he directed City of Ember, Poltergeist, not the original, the remake of it, and a specific episode of the Scream TV series, sorry, I'm having trouble speaking, called The Village of the Damned. And he's also working alongside with Jason Reitman for the new Ghostbusters movie coming out early next year. So he's definitely pretty busy with that. I think the movie's pretty much wrapped up at this point, but I mean, with it coming out and getting delayed, I'm sure there's still some things with that. So given the opportunity for writing, he's done some really fantastic things, and it's super interesting. Now, to start all of this off, he is such a nice guy. When I messaged him on Instagram last week, I did not at all for the life of me actually expect him to respond, because I mean, you're a director and like writer. You pretty much all of your time is like taken up. We're also in the midst of a world pandemic, but I went and shot my shot on Instagram in the least annoying way possible that I could think of, and he was really enthusiastic about getting back to me and wanted me to shoot him questions. So I was super ecstatic about that, and I didn't expect him to respond so fast, so I didn't actually quite have questions set up. So I had to come up with a few in roughly like an hour's time to try and get them to him. And I got some answers back today from him. So I'll be getting into those in just a little bit, but really wanted to preface this with just how nice and like how kind it was that he was totally willing to do this. I haven't heard back from Dan Harmon, and I highly doubt that I'm going to at this point. But hey, getting a response from anyone and then being seemingly really like excited to discuss something is great. And maybe if I did ask him if he wanted to come on and talk, he would, but it's hard to set up and stuff. But anyways, going a little bit more into intro work, it's hard for me to figure out exactly what to say that I haven't already said in regards to him, since I've in a lot of the earlier episodes and in regards to the art book, I've discussed front to back basically every single thing that I possibly could. But for what I may or may not have gone over, he got his master's degree in fine arts from the University of California in 2002. And then going into a bit of a lot of the early behind the scenes stuff and the one like talking that he did after one of the screenings. So for I believe his master's fine arts project, he had a animated short, it was a short, but there was some animation that he did inside of it called The Lark. So once that got screened, it caught the attention of an assistant for the Creative Artists Agency. And from there, it made its way around and got passed up to Robert Zemeckis, where he then was offered the director spot for Monster House. And it's crazy, like, to think that all of these things couldn't have gone so, like, perfectly and stuff, that we'd end up the way we are now. And if none of that happened, then I wouldn't be sitting here talking about it now, would I? for all I know, this has probably had a huge impact on me that I've had no idea about. So it's a nice moment, and we're getting close to the end of it. But anyways, so after getting the director's spot for Monster House and its release, it was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, but just barely lost out to Happy Feet. Now I wonder if the world would be any different had Happy Feet not won and Monster House did. Do I hear anyone talk about Happy Feet these days? No. Are people still talking about Monster House? You bet they are. So that's a win in my books. Down the line, Happy Feet had no cultural impact whatsoever. And I can't remember the last time anyone actually talked about it, so take that, Happy Feet. You win in my heart. So we're gonna get right into the Q&A here. This might end up being quite a short episode because I don't want to tack anything extra on, because this is strictly just the Q&A. So getting into it, the questions that I asked him aren't in any particular order, and some of them didn't quite get answered, but he went and did a really good job through some of these, and I might actually give him a little bit of a follow-up afterwards. So I asked, I know that it was released quite some time ago, but within the introduction you did for the art book, you mentioned breathing life to a 2-story house presented a billion technical and creative challenges. All but 2 will be covered in this book. I'm curious as to what the other 2 challenges were that you didn't quite mention. And he said, the 2 aspects of making the film that I didn't cover in the book were electricity and hydration. That wasn't, I thought maybe he was using the, that as like a joke for 2 things that I won't cover, because there's a billion and 1 things, and you never go over the and 1. But there was electricity and hydration. And you know what? That's totally true. We never really get to see the electrical pipe or electrical wires, except for in that one cut scene or concept art scene. And hydration, there's never really any specific pipes, and we don't really figure out where the water comes from within the house. So there we go. Animation technology has done leaps and bounds since the movie has been released, and even the world has been taken by storm for shows and movies following kids and fantastical problems they face. And I gave a few examples, being like Stranger Things and It, because I think those are 2 of the biggest ones right now. But oh god, there's so many other movies that are coming out of the woodwork nowadays. It's a really hot topic. So the question is, do you think a movie within the same universe could be done nowadays? If a possessed house is possible, I could only imagine that there could be cryptids and other horrors roaming around. And Gil's response is, I think the fact that Monster House happened at all is a miracle. I don't think a movie like Monster House could happen today, but then again, it shouldn't have ever really been allowed to happen, and yet we somehow cheated fate that way. So, I really like this answer to that, because when you think about it, it's all just a bunch of miracles and whatnot aligning at perfect times to make this movie. He got scouted like immediately after he finished university or college, I think, and right after he finished this thing, and immediately was picked up by one of the biggest of all time, Robert Zemeckis, with like the side of Steven Spielberg, for pretty much a first ever motion captured horror kids movie using a brand new studio and like Dan Harmon as the writer. At the time he wasn't huge or anything, I don't think, but wow, when you look back on it, all the stars aligned, and he even managed to get the wish list of all of the actors. Like, it is insane. So yeah, wow. And even mentioning the cryptids and other horrors potentially roaming around, I sort of took that idea based off of what Simon Wilkins was putting on his website with the Encyclopedia of Monsters. And I think it would be really interesting to maybe have like something animated in the same fashion, but more horror themed, maybe around the cryptids and stuff that were potentially mentioned. Or, I don't know, if they can make the house this expression or filled with so much expression, I would love to see how they do monster designs. I did a question. The music in this film is absolutely perfect. It moves along so well with what is happening on screen at any given moment. Were you and Douglas Pipes working with a soundtrack at the same time the animation was being worked on, or did one come first and base the other on it? I didn't get a response for that one, but I might give him a little follow-up on a couple of those. Since I got to these a little bit late, I didn't want to... Oops, sorry. I didn't get an opportunity to quite read all over them before it was a little bit too late for me to start the podcast for tonight. So I might come back to him on that. Another one. Comedy horror seems like it was a little unrepresented prior to this, where movies would lean a little too far towards either comedy or horror, giving an example of Evil Dead 2 and Gremlins and Tremors. Were there any specific difficulties with trying to walk that thin tightrope while also keeping age rating and children in mind? Now, in regards to bringing up Evil Dead, the movie, I mentioned it taking like a tonal shift in one of the episodes a few days ago, but the movie starts off as straight up just, it's a horror movie. Guy, Ash goes to the cabin with his girlfriend, pretty much everyone's dying, the Necronomicon, and then halfway through the movie it just becomes this very campy and comedic, hyper gory movie. He gets the chainsaw arm. It plays way more into a campy comedy horror than it does horror. Now, I'm not saying that is a bad thing, but in regards to this movie, it does walk the tightrope very, very well in keeping the dark tones and the horror aspects, but at no point is it outright so stupid that you're taken aback by all of it. Especially given the soundtrack, it keeps you immersed all the way through. And, his response, tone is everything in a film like Monster House. A lot of my energy was put into making sure that the film balanced horror, comedy, and drama and played well for a wide audience. I mostly relied on my memories of watching movies as a young kid and playing with the line between being terrified and feeling safe. In my experience as a movie lover, that line is everything. And I absolutely love that response, especially relying on memories of watching movies as a young kid. Because I feel like so many directors nowadays, they write for a younger audience, but at no point do they actually stop to think and remember what things used to feel like when they were younger, or how it felt for them to be taking in the media of them being at a younger age. Because you can very clearly see here, relying on memories of watching movies as a young kid, playing the line between being terrified and feeling safe. At no point do you want to have the movie marketed towards the kids be too outwardly scary that you can't recommend it to children, but at the same time, you don't want it to be mind-numbingly children-like, if that makes sense. Because there's almost at no point in this movie is there any... do fables typically have a moral at the end of them? This doesn't have a moral throughout the whole movie, but it's still marketed towards kids, and there's a lot going on to take in all at once. But it's really nice to see that he was playing with his memories in that regard. Because, this is a totally awful example, but the first thing that came to mind was, let's take watching Riverdale, for example. It's written by adults, and it's marketed towards kids. It's supposed to be high school. And I know the entire show is meant to be over the top and stuff, but at no point does it ever feel like most of the kid actors or anything would be doing this kinds of stuff. So, it kind of loses a lot of the immersion and whatnot of that time. And then I said, although not explicitly stated in the movie, it seems to take place in 1983. Was there any specific inspiration for using that year rather than the present day? And he says 1983. I never explicitly said a year, but I did want to capture an authentic nostalgic childhood moment in time, and for me, the mid-80s crystallized into that touchstone. We moved to LA in 1984 when I was 7, and so I guess that time is seared into my memory. Also, and it seems insane to say this now, but there hadn't really been any period films set in the 80s then, at least none of them that took it seriously. Boogie Nights was an outlier, but there was still lots of culture. There's still lots of culture to mine. And as far as I was concerned, making an actual Amblin film, I had a responsibility to set the world in a world where Amblin really meant something. Okay, I need to actually double check this. What does Amblin mean? Amblin Entertainment. Oh, it's the American film. Oh, it's the Steven Spielberg thing, and that's started in 1981. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, it actually is totally bizarre to think of it nowadays. The market is so heavily saturated with 80s, 70s, 90s, all those decades of just living are now totally being brought up for the factor of nostalgia and retro because it's very, very popular. Stranger Things taking place in the 80s. It, at the beginning, taking place also in like the 70s/80s. And everywhere you look, there's 70s, 80s, pop culture references to back then, even though most people weren't even alive back then. You get a cool nostalgic feel for the time period, even if you didn't live through it. And I don't know why that's the case. Like even I feel like I'm getting nostalgic for that time period for having not even lived in it. I was born in 1998, and here I am, feeling like, wow, back then. But I think nostalgia doesn't come specifically from a memory, rather than it's a feeling you get when it, like, you connect something. It's hard to explain, but you just can feel it. I might delve into the nostalgia thing after I get through the rest of these questions, because I want to make sure I get through all of these. But really, really liked the thoughts behind that. I thought maybe it was just like, you know, it's just easier to do a different time period, or it was pretty generic enough. But we got a nice in-depth one. So I say, lots of people consider this a hidden gem of a movie. Did you expect this movie to still be talked about to this day? And Gil says, I'm psyched that the film has got a following that seems to have grown. It's a weird movie that came out in a summer that was super crowded with other animated films. It's nice that a group of people found something in the film to hang on to. I put a lot of myself into the film, and the results definitely changed my life. And, I can't even... Yeah, it meant Happy Feet and a bunch of other movies. It came out at such a weird time, and it was a Halloween movie that didn't get released around Halloween. Now, when I ended up seeing it, and when it came to theaters up where I live, it already was Halloween. But for its initial release, it was pegged for a summer release, which is a huge time of the year for movies. Like, you always get the big movies like Avengers and whatnot at the end of April, beginning of May. So it's really crazy to think about it that way. And even now, we're getting like Godzilla and stuff. That's such an 80s thing. And they're making reprisals coming out as like summer blockbuster movies. It's a wild time, and I'm glad that he appreciates that the movie's still being talked about. Because I mean, in all honesty, it's probably a little bit weird that, at least with me, that I'm talking about it this much still. But hey, real recognize real. Oh, and here's probably one of the more interesting aspects of questions that I asked was a lot of the smaller references that I had brought up in regards to like some things happening in the movie and whatnot. So not all of them got covered, but a good amount of them did. And I think the most important ones got covered. So a couple of theories that have come up in regards to references in the movie, and I'm curious as to if they're intentional or not. The construction site sign saying, "We've drained the lake." Is this connected to the whole draining the swamp political movement? And he says, we drained the swamp is definitely pre-political. It was a reference to developers destroying natural spaces in the effort to build out a neighborhood. And yeah, it fits absolutely perfectly within that time period. So that one's a little bit more on the obvious end, but sometimes it's nice to get clarity, and nowhere anywhere online has it been confirmed or debunked in regards to some of this stuff. So there we are. When Chowder sprays the wind-up symbol monkey in the basement, is this anything to do with the monkey from Stephen King's novel Skeleton Crew? Gil says, the wind-up monkey is a reference to the poster for the George Romero film Monkey Shines. Still the creepiest poster ever. Also, incidentally, the inspiration for the poster to My Poltergeist. So, Monkey Shines. Which, okay. Oh, that makes so much sense. There is, like, the front cover of the movie is just straight up a symbol monkey, and I think it looks almost identical to that of the monkey in the basement, except like this one's looking a lot more real. And a quick thing about the movie: a man becomes quadriplegic after a terrible, horrible accident. His friend is conducting experiments with monkeys, offers Alan a well-trained monkey to help keep him company and raise his spirits. Now the movie's a horror, and I won't get into it anymore, but that's the way it went. And that is, I've never heard of that movie before. And it's funny that that's a thing for it. And then also he mentions that as being the inspiration for his poster for the remake. I don't know if I can find any specific one, but I think it's just super simple. One thing on the thing, or one thing within the cover, and that's it. And it works really good. So now I'm definitely gonna have to check out the movie, I think. But it's really nice that he was able to. I'm assuming the Poltergeist movie was probably a huge inspiration in regards to horror for him. So it's cool that he's able to do that up. Moving on. Oh wait. Oh yeah, okay. I did clear that. And I think this is probably the biggest question that I actually had. I mentioned earlier that the vacuum cleaner dummy being a reference to a character in the background within Donnie Darko. So, the vacuum cleaner dummy bears a striking resemblance to a background character in Donnie Darko. When Donnie opens the door during his Halloween party, you can see someone wearing a Letterman jacket and a sort of fish mask. Is this just coincidence? And he says, the look of the vacuum cleaner doll came out of a drawing session I had with my longtime storyboard designer Simon Wilkins, who we've seen a lot of his art for, and he is insanely talented. We both love old Hollywood horror, so the creature from the Black Lagoon mask was a natural, and the Letterman jacket was a nod to the classic Americana/Amblin vibe of the film. It's got as much to do with Teen Wolf as it does with anything else. That said, I love Donnie Darko and have seen it a bunch, so it's totally possible that the background character look infected my brain. And that was all the questions that I was able to come up with. I mean, I could have come up with more, but I really wanted to not totally bombard him with questions, because there was actually a couple more that I didn't read off that I did ask him but didn't quite get answered. But I mean, you've got this random guy messaging you on Instagram asking to send you some questions. You probably don't know exactly what you're getting in for, but I'm not official in any regard. So I wanted to, I don't know, just give him some, not hardball questions, but just some questions that really make you think. And I think that I got some really good responses out of him. And especially for a movie being 14 years old, like, it's definitely hard, I would imagine, to come up with a lot of answers for something that you most likely don't totally remember. So it is really, really nice that he was able to go like this in depth with a lot of the questions, because some of them were pretty simplistic questions and some of them were a little bit more in depth, and he was managed to just give really nice responses all the way through, and I am extremely grateful for that, and I cannot overstate it enough. Now, I haven't seen much of his other movies, but I have seen City of Ember, and even if that one didn't do particularly hot in the box office and some other aspects, I always remembered really enjoying that one as a kid as well. The entire thing being shrouded in this air of mystery, and I didn't read the books, but from the way the first one ended, I would have really liked to see how he took on the rest of them in the series. I don't think it was originally planned that way. Oh, and I can't believe I totally forgot to mention this. He originally stepped up to do the writing, I believe writing and directing for the Five Nights at Freddy's movie that was announced in like 2016, but he dropped out of that a while back. But that was an absolutely massive shock to me, because it's a like Five Nights at Freddy's thing. Would you expect anyone to really like do that? Like, definitely not for me at the very least. And also, sorry, I'm trying to look up something really quick, but I can't. Ah, there we go. Okay. And on the mentioning back on the topic of nostalgia, because I think it's pretty pertinent to all of the things that were like described. There's like a topic about nostalgia that I remember reading once before, and it came into the topic of Earthbound. So this is kind of off the thing totally, but something that makes you feel nostalgic, which being weird because you technically have no nostalgia for it, as you barely knew anything about it when you were growing up or anything like that. And for me, that's like the 80s. And it makes you realize that nostalgia has less to do with specific things you personally remember from the past, and it's way more to do with just creating a general feeling that resonates with how you've felt in the past. And that feels like a really important but subtle distinction. And I would imagine, yeah, so many people with the 80s thing sort of resonate with the idea of 80s kids being all of those movies take place with like a friend group and are usually coming of age. So I think that's a really nice way for him to like talk about that in his childhood and how he put a lot of himself into the movie. But I believe this is probably the best possible place to end it off. I got through all of the answers, and I'm still just really ecstatic that I was able to like get this from him. And yeah, I can't thank him enough if he's watching this. Thank you so much for shooting me the answers, Gil. It was lovely having you answer them for me, and maybe down the road I'll maybe be able to get you to sign a copy of my movie or something of the sort. But it's been nice going through this with the month. We are in the last. We've got like pretty much 2 more days at this, and it's super weird. But I really appreciate all of you guys for sticking around through this, and all the most days where I didn't get actually a friend on, but I did it regardless. And yeah, you guys mean a lot to me. But I'll be able to, I guess I'll catch you guys tomorrow, and I hope you're all doing well around these times. Take care.